Angel Reese just got traded for what fans are calling a bag of Skittles. 2 late first-round picks and a second-round swap. No cash, no established players coming back. Nothing that screams 2-time All-Star who led the league in rebounds. And the wildest part? Chicago didn't shop her around looking for a better deal. They just wanted her gone. So the question isn't whether the return was weak. It obviously was. The question is what Chicago knew that made them willing to take practically nothing just to move on. The suspension, the locker room drama, the leaked stories all point to one thing. This wasn't about basketball anymore. The suspension is where the mask came off, not the trade itself. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Not the locker room whispers that leaked to reporters over the summer, but the actual half-game suspension Chicago handed down in September after Reese sat with the Chicago Tribune and told the media her team needed to get great players. She didn't say it in a private meeting with the front office. She didn't voice concerns quietly to coaching staff. She went directly to the press and basically announced the organization wasn't good enough for her standards. Chicago's response was immediate. They benched her for half a game and slapped her comments with an official label, conduct detrimental to the team, says. That phrase isn't something organizations throw around casually. That's paper trail language. This was, Chicago's front office wasn't reacting emotionally to one bad quote. They were documenting a problem they'd been sitting with for months. Because you don't suspend your own all-star over a single interview unless the relationship is already shattered beyond repair. And the cracks had been showing long before September. The suspension wasn't the beginning of Chicago's problems with Reese. It was the organization finally putting it in writing. They needed documentation for a move they'd already decided on privately, because when you're about to trade a 2-3-year-old all-star for minimal return, you better have your reasons documented. Let's rewind to what Reese said about Courtney Vandersloot. Vandersloot had spent years building Chicago's culture from the inside. A veteran point guard respected across the league, someone teammates genuinely looked up to. When she went down with an injury, Reese didn't keep quiet or say the right things publicly. She called Vandersloot old, implied she was washed up, and made it clear Chicago couldn't rely on her anymore. Players around the league noticed immediately, because that's not how you talk about a teammate when cameras are rolling, let alone behind closed doors. Vandersloot, by the way, is a 2-time WNBA champion, 5-time All-Star, 2-time All-WNBA first-team selection, who left the New York Liberty, a championship-caliber roster, to come help Chicago. And Reese threw her under the bus in front of reporters without a second thought. Then there's Camila Cardoso. This one's even stranger, because Cardoso was Reese's own front court partner, the person she shared the paint with every single night. Multiple sources inside the building reported Cardoso walked out on Reese, and that her treatment of younger players, specifically, was making the locker room feel unstable. Think about what it takes to drive your own teammate to that point. That's not a personality clash. That's a pattern. And people inside Chicago's organization had been watching it long enough that commentators openly noted there's never been a team, not at Maryland, not at LSU, not with the Sky, where Reese didn't eventually create friction. The flagrant foul situations with Caitlin Clark followed the same playbook. Multiple incidents across the last 2 seasons drew league attention, and every time the gap between what Reese said publicly and what the footage actually showed became harder to ignore. The physical plays were one thing, but the narrative Reese built around them was something else entirely. Then came the 2025 season opener against Indiana, where Reese got tangled up with Clark, drew offsetting technical fouls, and afterward publicly framed the whole thing as discrimination. Her own teammates reportedly weren't expecting her to pivot there, and the gap between her narrative and what actually happened on the floor was obvious to anyone who watched the replay. By the time late-season absences started piling up and Reese cited a back injury, Chicago's front office had mentally moved on. The timing was suspicious enough that fans and reporters both noticed, because those absences lined up almost perfectly with stretches where internal accountability conversations were getting loudest. And then she turned up on a private jet on the way to Las Vegas, twerking in a viral video, which didn't exactly sell the back injury story to anyone paying attention. The optics were terrible. Your team is fighting for playoff positioning, you're supposedly hurt, and you're partying on social media? Chicago's front office saw all of it. They didn't move Reese because her numbers dropped. She led the league in rebounds both seasons. They moved her because managing her had started costing more than she produced. Chicago chose Cardoso over Reese. Let that sink in. The front office sat down, looked at a two-time All-Star who led the league in rebounds, then looked at a younger center who hasn't made an All-Star team, and decided the latter was worth building around. That wasn't a salary cap decision or a roster numbers calculation. That was a verdict on who they wanted representing their culture going forward. And Reese lost that vote. Cardoso fits what Chicago is trying to run because she works within a system instead of pulling against it. She doesn't cost the coaching staff practice time or locker room energy just to keep things functional. She shows up, does her job, and doesn't create headlines for the wrong reasons every 3 weeks. Trading Reese wasn't Chicago admitting she can't play. It was Chicago admitting she doesn't fit, which is actually a colder thing to say about a player than just calling her not good enough. The efficiency argument against Reese has been sitting in plain sight for 2 straight seasons. Her rebounding numbers are legitimate, nobody disputes that. But her shooting range is basically non-existent. Her pick-and-roll partnerships don't generate clean looks for guards, and a huge chunk of her offensive production comes from grabbing her own misses rather than creating anything new. Chicago's rebuilt offense wants floor spacing, ball movement, guards operating in open lanes, and a front court partner who can function at the top of the key. Reese doesn't do any of that. When the trade dropped publicly, the return felt insulting. 2 future first-rounders projecting as late picks and a second-round swap in a 1-5 team league. That's what Chicago got back for a 3-year-old, 2-time All-Star who led the league in rebounds across her first 2 seasons. The picks aren't technically worthless. Late first-rounders mean Chicago gets flexibility they didn't have before. But not worthless is a long way from full value, and nobody in the WNBA media space seriously argued Chicago extracted what a player of Reese's profile should return on the open market. Analysts immediately called it a fleece job, with Atlanta getting an all-star for next to nothing and the Sky walking away with capital they won't even use until 2027 or 2028. The bag of Skittles nicknames started trending within 2 hours because fans did the math almost instantly. If Reese is as good as she and her supporters claim, why did Chicago only pull 2 late first-rounders? Either the Sky front office completely botched the negotiation, or the teams that could have offered more simply didn't want to pay it. Those are 2 very different explanations, and the second one raises a much darker question. What did the rest of the league already know? Chicago's official statement called the trade designed to achieve roster balance, and critics read that immediately as the organization confirming they absolutely wanted her gone and just dressed it up in corporate language. The Sky weren't looking for the best offer. They were looking for any offer. Atlanta's fan base split almost perfectly down the middle within hours. Half the fan base posted jersey pre-orders and Bayou Barbie in the A graphics before the trade was even officially confirmed. The Dream's social media account welcomed her, with Bayou Barbie equals Atlanta within minutes. Ticket prices spiked from $38 to $68 in a single day, though they dropped back down within 6 hours, which tells you something about how sustainable that initial excitement actually was. Some fans even noticed the Dream's first jersey stock seemed intentionally small, just enough to claim a quick sellout for optics. The other half of Atlanta's fan base started asking practical questions immediately. How do the minutes work with Brittany Griner and Brianna Jones already there? Why did the Dream give up so little to get her? And whether Chicago knew something Atlanta didn't. That last question got louder every time a reporter connected another dot between the suspension, the Cardoso walkout and the Vandersloot comments. Because teams don't move productive players for minimal returns unless they've already decided the drama costs more than the production. Chicago fans who'd watched the locker room situation up close felt vindicated. Several longtime Sky supporters posted that the front office finally made the right call, not because Reese can't rebound, but because the team played worse when she controlled the room's energy. Meanwhile, Fever fans weren't nervous about any of this. 4 regular season games between Indiana and Atlanta means 4 chances for Clark to put up numbers against a front court that can't guard her. Let's talk about what Atlanta's actually running on the floor, because the roster fit makes 0 sense against a team like Indiana. Atlanta's front court was already slow before this trade. Brittany Griner and Brianna Jones were eating up interior minutes, and now Reese is walking in the door. So Atlanta's paint is going to be crowded, heavy, and flat-footed against a Fever team that runs pace and space as well as anyone in the East. Griner still carries real post presence, and her name still means something, but she's not a pick-and-roll defender who can chase Aaliyah Boston through screens. And she can't rotate fast enough to contest corner threes, which is exactly what Indiana forces teams into when Clark runs the offense. Clark doesn't just shoot. She moves the ball into actions that make slow bigs choose between protecting the paint and closing out on shooters. Jones is a hard worker and a genuine rebounder, but stacking her alongside Griner and Reese creates a front court where nobody can guard the perimeter. That's a real problem against Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham, who shoot off movement and don't need much daylight to get a clean look. You can't sag off both of them, but Atlanta's front court can't chase them either. So Indiana gets to pick its poison every single possession. Reese's shooting has been a documented problem throughout her WNBA career. Teams just sag off her, pack the paint, and dare her to shoot over the top. Atlanta's spacing problem compounds itself every possession. Indiana's roster isn't being built from scratch. Clark's injury in 2025 cost the Fever real ground in the standings, but the coaching staff used that time to sharpen rotations and push the supporting cast into bigger roles. So the team Clark returns to is already functioning, already winning, already knowing how to close games without her carrying everything alone. Coming back healthy into a system that's already clicking is completely different from coming back and rebuilding from zero. Boston draws defenders into the paint. Mitchell cuts off ball. Lexi Hull plays the kind of physical, disciplined defense that disrupts rhythm. And Cunningham stands in the corner, ready to shoot the moment anyone loses track of her. That's 4 players all making the defense work simultaneously, and Atlanta's front court has to cover all of it with legs that don't move fast enough. Rhyne Howard and Alicia Gray are legitimately good guards. Howard especially has been one of the more underrated players in the East for 2 straight seasons. But adding Reese doesn't give them more room to operate. It does the opposite, because now the paint is even more congested, and the driving lanes they rely on get tighter every time Reese sets up near the basket. Gray and Howard need floor space to be effective, and Atlanta just swallowed 3 front court players who can't create it. Atlanta fans have already started posting about the minutes problem, asking publicly how the dream planned to split time between 3 front court players, and the front office hasn't answered that question with anything concrete yet. When the trade dropped publicly, Reese posted Angel's Dream Atlanta What's Up almost immediately, which read less like genuine excitement and more like someone who'd already planned how to control the story before the announcement hit. Fast, positive, loud. But behind that post, reports surfaced that she was furious, not just about being traded, but about the public framing Chicago put around it. The detrimental to the team language. The locker room stories that leaked right alongside the trade news. The Sky's statement about roster balance that everyone read as thinly veiled relief to have her gone. She reportedly felt like the franchise was burning her reputation on the way out deliberately. And then came the quote that really tells you everything. Reese reportedly told people close to her that she's worth more than the entire Chicago Sky. Not worth more than the picks they got back. Not worth more than the contract value. worth more than the whole franchise, every player, the entire organization. Chicago traded her for 2 picks they won't use until 2027 and 2028. And her response was to tell her inner circle she's worth more than the team that just let her go for pocket change. That's not confidence. That's someone who genuinely doesn't understand why this happened, or refuses to. Because if you're worth more than the entire franchise, teams don't move you for a second-round swap. They build around you. They negotiate extensions. They don't create paper trails and dump you the first chance they get. Atlanta just inherited a player Chicago was desperate to move, for a return the entire basketball world called embarrassing. They're running 3 non-shooting bigs against a fever team that thrives on spacing and pace. Clark's coming back healthy, to a system that already knows how to win without her. The Dream wanted the marketability. They got the jersey sales, the social media buzz, the ticket spike. But jersey sales don't guard Kelsey Mitchell coming off a screen. And social media buzz doesn't win playoff games when Indiana's running you off the floor 4 times, exposing every spacing problem Atlanta just locked themselves into. Chicago didn't trade Angel Reese because she can't play. They traded her because managing her cost more than she produced. Stay locked with my channel Simply Explained for more updates.